thing to do, like flossing. Flossing seems to be, my dentist says I should do it. My mom says I should do it. No. I'm deviating here for a moment, but I'm going to try and make a point. If you are flossing on a daily basis, you can stop. All right. Science has shown, and again, what I'm showing you today is good science around flossing and bedwetting. But science has shown that flossing has got very little to no impact on preventing gum disease or cavities. So, my word, you've just saved yourself a minute every day from now on until the day you die, which is fantastic. But again, it seems logic to floss, but science says not. The same thing with lifting. That's what we call waking your child at night before you go to bed. So you put your child to bed sort of at 7 or 8 o'clock, whenever bedtime is. Then you kind of go to bed around 10, 11 o'clock. And just before you go to bed, most parents will wake their child up, take their child to the bathroom, get them to empty their bladder, put them back into bed, and they carry on sleeping. The problem with that is that most kids don't even wake up. They kind of just stumble to bed, fast asleep, go to the loo, back in bed, done. And the whole point of bedwetting is that you want your child to wake when their bladder is full, not when you think they should go to the bathroom. And lifting, and there's a bit of controversy around this, but lifting, that's what we call that, often prolongs the season of bedwetting. So I would recommend you don't do that, okay? The Don says no more flossing. Thank you, Don, for listening. All right, so that's the conservative approach. Before I go into the proactive approach in terms of how we manage and deal with bedwetting, let me take a step back and let's talk about what causes bedwetting. Okay, so there are basically 3 reasons that your child wets the bed at night. Firstly, their bladder is just too small. All right, children grow. As they grow, their bladder increases in size, as does their body, as does the rest of them. It's the same with your internal organs, your bladder in particular. Some kids take longer to grow than others, and therefore have smaller bladders that can take smaller volume of urine at night. Number 1, small bladders. Number 2, your children need to produce a hormone called vasopressin. All right, you can forget the name of that hormone, but that hormone tells their kidneys to produce less urine at night. All right, and because they're producing less urine at night, they're going to create less volume of urine, and they're not going to wet their bed. However, kids that are not producing enough vasopressin, of that hormone, their kidneys just carry on producing as they would during the day, and end up with far too much urine in that little bladder of theirs, and they wet their bed at night. Okay, so small bladders, hormones that aren't quite mature yet, and finally, an inability to wake up. Many of you've got those kids that just are deep sleepers. They sleep through anything and everything. All right. Pussy is here. All right, I see. Thank you, Dr. The Don. Let me see if I can quickly welcome Pussy in here. There we go.
Childhood shouldn't be spoiled by bedwetting. Dry nights have 5 layers for maximum protection, so kids can go to bed worry-free, have a dry night's sleep, and wake up awesome. Awesome days start with Dry Nights. Search Dry Nights for a free sample.
Join us. Looking very spiffy tonight.
You too. Why didn't you give me the memo to wear a blazer or something to look formal?
Well, I've got to try and have this sort of air of dignity and wisdom, and the graduate gets a little bit, but I thought maybe the jacket would add to that. So, I'd get people to believe me, which is fantastic. But listen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
we
Doug.
jumped into a little bit of, what causes bedwetting. We can maybe repeat that quite quickly. I see a whole bunch
Yes,
of
please, for the people who just joined in. Absolutely.
But listen, it's your gig, so let's introduce yourself, tell everyone who you are, why you're here. Let's talk a bit about Bedwetting Day. I'll try not to repeat myself, and we can get into some of those questions that I know you have prepared.
Okay, so I already went live on my page. I already told the people on my page a bit about what we're going to talk about and about bedwetting, and I saw a few people also talking about how embarrassing it is to have like a normal conversation about it, especially if it's happening to your child, your niece or your nephew. So I want to know let's just jump right into it. What is bedwetting? Because where I come from, let me tell you, if you are like 8 years old or 9 years old, you wetting the bed, it's either you are naughty or you don't listen. It's, people don't want to talk about it. What is bedwetting?
Yeah, no, you're so right. In fact, the stories around that are frightening. Let me tell you 2 stories, and then I'll get into what is bedwetting. But 2 of those stories, I know a chaplain at Polesmore Prison here in Cape Town who was talking, kind of engaging or interviewing a gang leader. And this gang leader said, when I was a kid, my parents, when I wet the bed, would make me stand in their room, in my shorts, in the dead of winter, behind the door, all night to punish me for wetting my bed. Now, I'm not saying that's why I became a gangster, a murderous criminal, but I'm saying that stays with us. In fact, a father, I was sharing this, and a father came to me afterwards and said, you know what my dad used to do? He used to take me to school and put the mattress in the back of the bucky to show all my friends the wet spot to try and get me to stop wetting the bed. Now, that borders on cruel, but it also speaks to parents who are desperate. We don't know what to do. We have a child that wets the bed. They shouldn't be wetting the bed. What do we do? And just before you join us, Pasi, we were talking about the kind of 3 causes of bedwetting. So let me just refresh for those who've just joined us. Bedwetting really gets defined as your child needs to be over the age of 5. That's when we expect a child to have bladder control at night, so 5 or older. And it needs to be at least twice a week. All right, so in terms of regularity, wetting my bed twice a week or more, 5 years or older, then we have a bedwetting. Then we can do something about that. All right, 3 main causes of bedwetting, and that's kind of where we picked up, and we can dive into some detail when the questions come up. But essentially, hormones. We have a hormone that tells our kidneys to produce less urine. Kids, as they're growing up, don't have that hormone, or they're producing not enough of the hormone, and so they produce too much urine at night. They've got small bladders. And then thirdly, where we kind of left off, is you get these deep sleepers, kids that just don't wake up for anything. I mean, I had one of them in my family, just slept through. It was amazing to kind of take them, when we go out somewhere, because they just sleep through. Worst kind of stuff. But those often are the kids that don't wake up when their bladder is full. And that's that connection between the brain and your bladder that needs to mature, the brain-bladder axis. And those possibly the 3 things that are the main causes of bedwetting. And let me just dive into this a little bit more. So that's primary bedwetting. And that's what we're going to spend most of the evening talking about, all right? Primary bedwetting is when your child has never been dry at night and they're still wetting their bed over the age of 5. Secondary bedwetting, which is around 1 in 5 of cases. So 4 and 5 are primary, 1 in 5 are secondary. That's what happens when a child has been dry at night for at least 6 months and then starts to wet the bed again. Now, that is a little more worrying than primary, because primary bedwetting, most kids are going to grow out of, really, 99% of kids. But secondary bedwetting often has a psychological component or a trauma component or a stress component. It could be bullying at school. It could be the birth of a sibling. It could be parental divorce. I mean, in terms of stress, do you know how stressful bedwetting is for kids? It ranks number 3 on the list of the most stressful things: parental fighting, parental divorce, and bedwetting in 3rd place. So this is a serious thing. And I'm going to be quite a bit. So back to you, man. I'm you've got me on a pedestal and now I'm talking, so I'm just going to slow down a little bit and take a breath. So
it's funny, are you talking about trauma? Because one of the questions here is about trauma and divorce. How does that affect a child? And then they end up obviously wetting the bed. I didn't know that, children that small I know they pick up when there's problems between the mom and the dad, but why do they wet the bed when they're stressed, if that's the thing?
Well, that's that brain-bladder connection again. So it's a neurological or neuropsychological disorder. But there's 2 schools of thought that wetting your bed stresses you, particularly when you're old. So the question is, does the child wet the bed because they're stressed, or does wetting the bed cause stress? Now, when you talk about trauma and parental divorce, that creates stress in a child, and often that then results in that secondary bedwetting. I was dry, I was fine, all kosher and happy. Then my mom and dad decided to separate. Then I started wetting my bed again. And that is something that needs to be seen by a professional, a psychologist, your family practitioner, because that needs to be treated. That's not something that you're going to treat with medication or pull-ups or bedwetting alarms. That needs someone to really take care of that child.
So there is no treatment for that. Let's say a child is fine, everything is fine in the house, but they just continue with wetting their bed up until they're like 5, 6, 7, or 8. So there's no treatment for that.
There is always treatment, but that cause, what you don't want to do is treat the symptoms when the cause is. So if by just treating the symptoms, you're going to get a child that possibly sleeps through the night, but you're not going to get to the root of the problem. All right. So in primary bedwetting, it's hormones, it's a small bladder, and it's inability to wake. In secondary bedwetting, it's psychosocial, if you like, or psychological. So you need to address those issues. If the issues are primary, so, bladder's too small, not producing hormone, there really are some things you can do. You can use medication. and medication, something like desmopressin. It's called DDAVP. You need a script for it anyway, so just go and speak to your GP. You don't need to remember the name of the medication. But that medication essentially tells your bladder or your kidneys to stop producing so much urine. So it's almost a clone of that hormone that your child is not producing. And once you take that medication, that hormone tells your kids' kidneys, stop producing so much urine at night. They don't produce, and they tend to explode at night. It works immediately, which is great. It works in most kids, probably 4/5 of kids, but it doesn't cure bedwetting. And so many people, parents say to me, listen, I want to cure bedwetting. You don't cure bedwetting. In primary bedwetting, it's a very natural season. You manage bedwetting. And this is one way to manage it. So your child has got a sleepover, or they've got kids coming to sleep over with them. That's a great time to, just give them a little tablet, because you know it's going to work, and it's going to work effectively. All right, and it works immediately. So that's the first thing you can do. This is the proactive approach. The other thing you can do is you can use bedwetting alarms. Now, where the pill speaks to the hormonal cause of bedwetting, bedwetting alarm speaks to that brain-bladder connection. These kids that are deep sleepers. And all that alarm really does is, as your child is starting to wet the bed, the alarm wakes them up and their bladder contracts and they stop. And it's a way of training their brain to realize when their bladder is full, and then kind of emptying their bladder. Now that's again also effective in around 2/3 of kids, but takes around 3 months for it to really become effective. So you need a lot of motivation for that. And let me tell you, that bedwetting alarm wakes up the whole household, not just the child who's wetting their bed. So those are the two most proactive things you can do as a parent. As far as support is concerned, and again, this is something Huggies is just great at. They've got a lovely product called Dry Nights Absorbent Pants. And that is something that children can wear, which takes away all that anxiety, all that worry of, am I going to wake up in a cold, wet bed? Can you imagine a child who's going over and sleep over, who knows they're bedwetting, has no idea, I'm with my friends, it's a weekend, and all I need to do is wake up and I'm in a wet bed, and I get teased and mocked, and so they don't go out. Now, something like those absorbent pull-ups, they're discreet, you don't hear them, they're super absorbent. That's a great way to help your child manage the season of bedwetting. It doesn't cure bedwetting. There's no need to cure bedwetting. It helps them manage themselves through that season with as little fuss and anxiety as possible. Okay,
so I see people asking me about I see people asking about, is it too early if you're training about 3-year-olds, toddlers? 3-year-olds, are they too young?
3-year-old is too young. You need to be 5 or older. That's when you expect you
5 or older.
3 or younger. No, that's potty training.
Oh, names. You're so loose. Yeah. I heard you talk about, before I jumped on, I heard you talk about not taking the child before bed to go wee-wee. Sometimes we do that as parents, like before we sleep. Go empty. Because someone also asked you about, are there certain foods that you should give a child before going to bed that can help prevent them from wetting the bed?
So 2 questions there, Percy. One is, we talked about this earlier, no lifting. That's what we call it. Putting a child to sleep, in the evening at 7 or 8, and then going in at 10 or 11 and waking up to go to the toilet when you go to bed. That's a no-go. That generally prolongs the season of bedwetting. Why? Because you're not letting your child's brain connect with its bladder and let its bladder tell it it's full. You're telling the child to get up, go to the, and so you just delay that maturation process. Okay, so that was the one. The other question you asked me, what was that?
About the food. What food must I avoid giving my son?
So there was no food that you need to avoid. I would just avoid high protein meals and high salt. And all that means is you just get slightly more concentration. It's something called osmosis, long story, but it just means your child's going to largely produce more urine because of those 2 ingredients. So avoid salt, avoid high protein, but other than that, there's no foods that are going to get your child to wet their bed at night. There's a little herb, in fact, called, I think it's horsetail. I'm not great on herbs and more Western medicine, but there is a herb, I think, called horsetail that has been shown. So if you can get hold of that. But that said, and again, I was looking at a study earlier this afternoon, in fact, at what works, and medication that I just referred to really does have an effect, and far greater effect than homeopathic medication. And again, not saying anything against homeopaths, just saying that's what the studies are showing.
Oh, okay, perfect. Now we spoke about dry nights, and one of the questions were, isn't that like sort of like a setback? When you're on the road training them, and then the other day they wet in the bed, the other day you're giving them the pants. Isn't there like a setback of some sort, or should you just continue giving them the pants if you feel like they will continue to wet the bed?
So I think the biggest issue with parents and bedwetting is not to make bedwetting an issue. And maybe I can segue into this to answer that question, Hasi, is the biggest issue for me when it comes to bedwetting, and I mentioned that right in the beginning, is firstly parents punishing their kids when it's not something that kids can control or even manage. So that's just a complete no-no. But we do know, again, from the studies, that kids who wet their bed have low self-esteem issues. It's tragic. They see themselves, they undervalue themselves compared to their peers. There's the sense of, of shame, of there's something wrong with me, and so have a very low self-esteem. And that plays itself out in school, and it plays itself out in school performance and sport. I mean, it's tragic. For something that is not their fault, they're blaming themselves. So as parents, the first thing you need to do before you get into medication and pull-ups or anything like that is just to say, this is very common, this is very normal, and it is not your fault. In fact, moms and dads, look me in the eye when I tell you this. It's probably your fault, like it was mine. If you're a bedwetter as a parent, and I kid you not, there is a 50% chance. One parent is a bedwetter, which I was, 50% chance that your children are going to wet their bed. And if both parents are bedwetters, a 75% chance. So if you ask me the question, whose fault is it that my kid wets the bed? It's your fault. Not that you need any more guilt as parents, but, there you go. Before you punish your child, think about it. Okay. But I divert again. Forgive me for diverting. The issue is emotional well-being. So not only self-esteem, not only school performance gets affected, but there are some studies to show that kids go on to an increased risk of depression if they are bedwetters. Now that's terrifying. I mean, we know what COVID has done to mental health around the world, and particularly in our country. Now add to that, a child that was a bedwetter that is at greater risk for depression, and it really is not a cocktail. So you as a parent want to manage your child through the season of bedwetting with as little impact and negative impact on their emotional well-being and their mental health as possible. And the way you do that is don't make it an issue. Get brothers and sisters involved. They never mock, they never tease, they never point fingers. The whole family's behind it. You can use rewards chart, which is great, but reward for dry nights. Don't punish for wet nights. And make this fun. Make this light. Dude, what do you think? You're gonna have a dry night tonight or not? I'm gonna put a bet on this. Are you gonna wear your pull-ups or not? No, Dad, I think I'm going to do this without my pull-ups tonight, or I don't know, man. I'm going to go with you. So just make it a, dare I say, a fun thing, not an issue, because you don't want your child to feel shamed and emotionally scarred because of it.
Yeah. So this is my question. Does dreams affect? Because sometimes you will hear someone said, "I dreamt I was somewhere peeing, and then I woke up." Obviously, when you ask a child, what were you dreaming? And then they will say they were peeing, and then the next day their bed is wet. Does dreams affect, your English doctor? I don't know, you said the bladder and the brain. So does dreams affect that, or dreams are just dreams? Because, sometimes we get very superstitious and we think, no, it was a bad dream. And sometimes you can't control it. You have a certain dream, like maybe it's having a dream fighting and you wake up actually shouting. It does happen with wetting the bed, where you dream you were somewhere peeing and it happens.
So I'm no dreams expert, but what I've read is that so often, and our brains are amazing. We think, we dream and it feels like I dreamt for 8 hours, but it was actually 5 minutes from the time I hit snooze to the time I woke up again. But it feels like a long dream. Now it's the same with wetting your bed. It's often that the child is wetting their bed, and that triggers a dream that I'm peeing somewhere. So it's not the dream that triggers the bladder to release. It's the bladder that's releasing that triggers the dream. So it's almost that kind of reverse brain bladder cycle. And again, not an expert. That's just what I've read, but that makes a whole lot of sense to me. So I dreamt that I was peeing, actually you were peeing, and then you dreamt that you were peeing. And in that split second.
Dreams come true, doctor. Dreams come true. Now let's talk about it happening. Does it happen only to, not only, but mostly to boys than girls? Because I was reading somewhere, and as I was just doing my research, and I read that it's actually, I don't know if they were saying that it happens more to boys than girls. Why is that, if that's true?
You are absolutely right. Thank you for doing your research. It is true. Boys are more affected than girls. As much as twice as many boys are affected than girls. Please don't ask me why, because we just don't know. That's what the statistics say. Boys more affected. And again, today, just on the radio earlier, callers calling in were all gentlemen saying, I used to wet my bed. I got steps after that, a message saying, my brother wet his bed, you know, and it generally was mostly male, not female. But why? I have no idea.
Okay. Another question is, my son always wets the bed and he's 7. What can I do to prevent it? And what can I put on the bed to hide?
Yeah, mattress covers are great. Dry nights are brilliant because, you know,
Dry nights are brilliant, yeah.
Because you're not lying on that plastic mattress. My word, sometimes when we travel or go camping, get that plastic mattress, it's horrible. That just keeps you awake keeps you awake all night. But that's what you can do. But let's talk about 7. So 7's an interesting age. Like I said, we expect children to have bladder control by the age of 5 or between 5 and 6. All right. If they're 6 and older and still wetting their bed, that's when you start with your proactive involvement. That's when you kind of get those dry nights, you know, pajama pants. That's when you get the medication. That's when you think of alarms. You know, by the age of 7, that's when I would get a specialist involved. That's when I would go to see my general practitioner and say, hey, doc, we're not sure what to do. My son is 7, still wetting the bed. Won't you please just do an examination? And that doctors are great. They know about bedwetting. They'll do a whole bunch of tests. They'll test his urine to see if there's not an infection. Often, you know, a lot of infection causes bedwetting at night. He'll test for diabetes. Diabetes is one of the biggest causes of bedwetting at night, you know, secondary bedwetting often. So it could be that. It could be constipation. You can imagine just, you know, your bowels pressing on your bladder, which makes your bladder volume smaller, which means you're going to wet your bed at night. You know, so it could be constipation. So that certainly is something over the age of 7 that I would go and see a doctor and just say, let's try and get to the bottom of this, and then we can deal with the cause of the problem, not just kind of deal with the symptoms.
So I saw here one of the questions was, I don't know if it's a question or she's telling us that after stopping the treatment, it starts all over again. So how can you advise someone like that?
But that's a great question. And don't worry, Marty, for joining late. Welcome. That's a great question. And what I want to say about that is that medication, that DDAVP, that desmopressin or mipramine, there's another kind of drug that tells the bladder just to relax and not be so agitated. That's another way of treating it. But those medications don't cure bedwetting. Remember, bedwetting isn't something that needs to be cured. It's something that needs to be matured and grown out of. So all that does is that medication acts as the hormone to tell your kidneys for that night, don't produce so much urine. And the medication does that. Your kidneys don't produce urine. You have a dry night, and that medication then gets flushed out by your kidneys, by your liver, wherever it goes. And tomorrow night is a new night with the same problem. My child is not producing enough hormone. So I give them another pill. If I stop giving them a pill, my child is still not producing that hormone, so they're going to go back to wetting their bed. So that medication doesn't cure or treat bedwetting. It helps your child get through the season of bedwetting with more dry nights than wet nights.
Okay, so we spoke roughly about, you know, communicating, us as parents, communicating right with the kids and not making them feel bad about it. What can you say to the parents now who are going through, who have a child who's obviously wetting their bed? What advice can you give them so that they don't get frustrated? You know, it does get frustrating, but how do we speak to the child so that we don't, you know, say bad things to them? Like I said, you know, in where I come from, I remember in primary school, if someone is wetting their bed, even in conversations in J1, you talk, yeah, we're now they're wetting their bed, you know, not nice. So what advice can you give to parents to just be kind to the kids when about bedwetting?
Yeah, that's the question, Pasi. So thank you for asking that. Firstly, I'd want parents to know this. It's quite normal. All right. Like we said earlier, 1 in 5 children between the ages of 5 and 10 are wetting their bed. You know, if you think about your kid in their school class of 24 kids, 4 or 5 kids are wetting their bed in his or her class. So you're not alone. Secondly, it come to pass. So kids at the age of 5, around 20% of them are wetting their bed. By the time they get to 10, only around 5% are wetting the bed. But by the time they're 18 and adults, it's down to under 1%. Why do I tell you that? Because the majority, 99% of children will outgrow bedwetting. So as parents, it's going to come to pass. You've heard that phrase. It's a lovely biblical phrase. It will come to pass. Most of the cases, 99% of cases, it's going to come to pass. All right. So let me set that up. So that's, this is a tough season, but you're going to get through it. And you want to get through it unscathed. So the most important thing then is to do it with your child. Tell them exactly what I've told you. That's common. You've got friends in your class, even though they don't admit it, that we know are wetting their bed. It's not your fault. We are never going to punish you for this at all. But let's see what we can do to help you have as many dry nights as possible. Whether it's limiting fluid, whether it's doing all those conservative things we said, or medication, or or wedding alarms, or dry nights.
Childhood should be fun. Don't let bedwetting spoil that. Dry Nights is the #1 brand for nighttime protection for bedwetting, so kids can go to bed worry-free, have a dry night's sleep, and wake up awesome. Childhood shouldn't be spoiled by bedwetting. Dry Nights have 5 layers for maximum protection, so kids can go to bed worry-free, have a dry night's sleep, and wake up awesome. Awesome days start with Dry Nights. Search Dry Nights for a free sample.
It doesn't matter whether it's during the day or at night, because sometimes you do have a child who goes to school from maybe 8 o'clock till 5. At 12 o'clock they nap. But the bedwetting only happens at school, but at home at night they're fine. Would the problem be? Is it the same problem? Doesn't matter whether it's at night.
It's
or
not
during the day, or bedwetting is bedwetting.
No, it's not the same problem. So nocturnal enuresis, that's bedwetting. Nocturnal, nighttime. All right. Daytime incidents have got a completely different cause, even if the child is sleeping. And if you think about that, this child falls asleep and they're going to wake up in 45 minutes or an hour. So there's way not enough time for their kidneys to produce enough urine to get their bladder to be really full to wet their little mat. So either it's easily solved by, before you go for an afternoon nap, you go to the loo. If you do that, and the issue is just a small bladder, that issue is solved completely. But if every time they go down for a nap and they wet their bed, even though you avoided the urine, then I would say that's probably got a psychological cause. So there's something that you need to look out for. There's bullying, or there's something not right with a child. There's stress that's causing it.
So just to wrap it up, for someone who just joined their life, just 5 important points about bedwetting and dry nights.
5 points. 5 points. Well, let me
5 points.
Let me end with a story. Well, in fact, okay, let me give you your points. I don't think it'll be 5, there'll be a couple, but then let me end with a story after that. So the most important thing to remember on this World Bedwetting Day, Pasi, is firstly that bedwetting is never your child's fault. All right. They can't control it. It's very common. All right. You're not the only one going through this. There's no shame in going through it. It's very, very common. 1 in 6, I think we said. And most importantly, because your child cannot control bedwetting at night, they should never, ever, 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 ever be punished.
Forever?
Never. All right, that's probably the most important thing. Point number 1, never ever punish your child for wetting the bed. If that's what you take away from tonight, my job is done. Okay, but let me end with a story. Thomas Edison, I suddenly forgot the guy who invented the light bulb. Certainly didn't invent the ring light, which we're both using, but he did invent the light bulb. Now, as a child, I don't know if Thomas Edison was a bedwetter. I mean, but at the age of 6, he came home from school one day with a letter from his teacher. And his teacher said, you need to give this to your mom. Don't let anyone else read it. All right. So he came home and said, Mom, here's a letter from the teachers. Thomas Edison, the great Thomas Edison, at the age of 6 or 7. Mother takes the letter. She opens it up. And she starts to cry. And she reads the letter to him. She says, what's Thomas? Oh, Mrs. Edison, your son is a genius. We cannot teach him in this school. He's too clever for us. Please, will you teach him? And that's what she did until the day she died. She died at a very young age, but she taught Thomas Edison, took him out of school, and she educated him. She taught him. And Thomas Edison went on to become this great inventor. The light bulb was one thing he did. He did thousands of other things. But years later, many years after his mom had died, he went through her things and he found this letter. And he opened the envelope and he read the letter. And what the letter said, in fact, was, your son is mentally deficient. He is expelled from the school. We do not want to teach him. You teach him. And that day, Thomas Edison wrote in his journal, he said, Thomas Edison became one of the greatest inventors of the 20th or 21st century. I can't remember when he was around, because his mother believed in him, because his mother said. And I tell you that story, age of 5 are so important, and they look to you for guidance. And if you say to that child of yours who's wetting their bed, buddy, my girl, it is not an issue. We're going to get through this together as a family. I mean, this is part of growing up. We're a family. It's messy. It's beautiful. This is not an issue. But as a parent, you run at risk of the emotional well-being being damaged, the depression. So, guys, from one parent to another who was a bedwetter and his kids who was bedwetters, it's going to pass. It'll be okay. Just deal with it in a way that best focuses on your child and gets them through this with as little emotional stress as possible. Point number 5.
Don't you have another story, doctor? Don't you have another story? That's incredible. Like, that's amazing. And you are so right, because I see with my daughter as well, every time she comes home and she has a habit of saying, I can't do this, I can't. And I'm trying so hard to teach her, no, you can. Maybe you can't now, but you will, and you can, you know. And it's so important, because she's also turning 5. She's at a point where I need to really inspire her and help her a lot, because she likes saying, I can't. And it's so frustrating, because I want her to say, yes, you can't now, but my darling, you can, and you will. Yeah. Thank you so much, Doctor. I think I don't know if we are out of time or anything. Let me see if there's any other question, because I think we covered all the questions that I was sent.
Sure. Hey, listen,
sent to us via
if you have any questions, you know, you can find us on Twitter, on Instagram. We're there. You're welcome to drop me a couple of questions if I can answer.
Yes,
if we didn't get to that. But yeah, Hussy, thank you for sharing the evening with me. And I'm so glad you came on. For one point, I thought, my word, I'm going to have to do this all on my own.
No, because I went live on my page. Luckily, someone said, no, Doctor is live on the other side. So it's like I was in Alexandra and you were in Senton. So I had to jump the bridge.
The other way around, I think.
And end my live and join you. Thank you so much. People are asking you to please save the live, because you're the one who went. So you have to save it on your for those who jumped on late. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Doctor, so much. Thank you to Dry Nights. Thank you to Huggies. I think we must have these every month, and like, you know, and people were asking, how does the doctor? They're asking, what do you eat? Because you still look so young.
Wow, now that's off the subject of tonight, but I'll say one thing. It's what I don't eat. Guys, you need to go and Google intermittent fasting. I finish eating at 8 o'clock in the evening, and I don't do breakfast, and I eat again at midday. So for 16 hours in a day, I just don't eat. And it is so good for you. I wish I could say it would help you with bedwetting. I don't think it can. But as far as everything else goes, just trying to stay young and healthy, really very valuable. So Google intermittent fasting and start doing it. It's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, Doctor, I'll say this for now. There's a word called andizi. I can't.
So let's end on that, because that's such an important point. You just said what your daughter keeps saying, I can't. And I'm saying, you can.
No, but I want to eat, Doctor. Hi.
So here's the thing. And it's the same with bedwetting. You kind of think, I can't do this. I can't get up again at night. I can't. With intermittent fasting, the idea of not eating for 16 hours is almost impossible to conceptualize. But if you just do it, it's actually easy. Yeah. Because there's so many diets that, you know, I'm just going to have lemon and water and grapes. You think I can do it. It's really hard to do. Fasting, just stop. And same with bedwetting, guys. It might seem like this mountain I've got to approach, but there's so much help out there. There's, as you said, there's Huggies Dry Nights. There's medication. There's things that you, so do that. Yes. Don't say,
absolutely. I can't. I just want to say thank you to Dr. Zipho Zenkosi. She's been, you know, talking to us. She's been posting Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Childhood shouldn't be spoiled by bedwetting. Dry nights have 5 layers for maximum protection, so kids can go to bed worry-free, have a dry night's sleep, and wake up awesome. Awesome days start with Dry Nights. Search Dry Nights for a free sample.